Hey everyone, and welcome back to Joe's Metal Mancave. Death, Doom, and other gloom. Today we're going to talk about old, mostly 90s, doomy death metal, which of course was pioneered in the early 90s by bands like My Dying Bride, Anathema, Paradise Lost, and Catatonia. Totally classic and essential stuff in my opinion, and music that when I first got into it about 22, 23 years ago, it really resonated with me in a deep and personal way because looking back to my late teens and early 20s, I was in sort of a perpetual state of depression and was doing a lot of stupid stuff like drinking heavily while on my medication and stuff like that, and I just, always felt like there was no light in that darkness. It was a really bad time, but I discovered this music and a part of me was really attracted to it because it was just fascinating for me to discover other people who seemingly had the same issues that I did, and it just became something I absolutely loved and still love to this day, although I haven't really followed a lot of the newer artists in the genre. Still, there's a lot of great classics from the 90s and early 2000s that are well worth checking out. So yeah, for this video I kind of wanted to focus on older stuff and generally lesser talked about records, so yeah, but it's my intention to definitely do multiple parts for this video to, just whenever the mood strikes, we're gonna have to have that right mood in my feel in my head and, right elemental conditions, so to speak. So yeah, let's get into it. To drown our sorrow, we are drinking Highland Park whiskey. Phenomenal whiskey. If you like whiskey, definitely get yourself. This is really good. Anyway, though, to kick things off, we're going to talk about a old Austrian band known as Ecstatic Fear and their 1999 album, A Somber Dance. Ecstatic Fear was formed in the early 90s as a four-piece band, and in 1996 they issued their debut album as a four-piece band, but by the time they got to the second album, A Somber Dance, the band had been reduced down to just one member, whose name is Matthias Kogler, and he filled out the rest of the roles in this band with various session members. This has become somewhat of I think a very rare and hard to get album, because it's only existed in this original pressing I have here, and then there's what I think is like one of those Russian bootlegs, like CD Maximum reissued it a few years after this, but to get original pressing is pretty hard these days. Anyway, Ecstatic Fear is a death doom band with some subtle gothicness to it, as well as a sort of neo-medieval romanticism and melancholy to it. It almost has this feel of like a lonely, miserable bard just alone in the castle singing songs of his lost love and just tragedy that has befallen him throughout the years of his life. Very melancholy, very dark, but just a beautiful album. There's lots of flute, classical guitar, cello, and backing female vocals that just make it just a phenomenal album, and it makes sense why it's such a legendary album, I guess, but very peculiar that it has not been re-released at this point. The last pressing was in 2002, and I'm guessing even those CD Maximum versions are hard to get at this point, or at least pretty pricey on Discogs and eBay. I think this is definitely one of the most expensive albums in my collection. I think last time I checked it was like a value like $80 or something like that, so that's pretty cool. But yeah, really great band. This band put out just two albums. This ended up being the second album the band did, and then Matthias said some years later that he had wrote enough material for a third and fourth album, but it just never happened. So I'm assuming he retired from music because he has done no projects since 1999, and Ecstatic Fear remains a cult underground favorite and definitely one of the best death doom bands of the 90s. Alright, continuing on, we're going to go to Australia and talking about a band known as Chalice and their debut album, Chronicles of Dysphoria. Chalice was formed in 1996, and this particular album was originally wrote and recorded in 1990 and released as a self-titled album. But then when they were picked up by Modern Invasion Music a year later, they decided to re-record the whole album and re-release it properly through Modern Invasion Music. This is another album where I cannot for the life of me remember how I came across it, but as soon as I heard this album, I absolutely loved it. I believe it was the song Solitary Waves, which was on a compilation, though I couldn't tell you which one because I've sold it since then, but it absolutely had me hooked right from the get-go. Phenomenal song. But anyway, Chalice was sort of a gothic doom metal band with sort of this operatic female vocals and lots of keyboards and violin and just a very gloomy mood to the music. They put out 2 more albums after this, and it was more and a little more stricter, I think, gothic metal style, and they added a flute player instead of a violinist going forward, but this is just phenomenal. I love Shira Lee's, her vocals are really good. Some people I've heard say they're annoying, but I think they're just incredible. I love it. Just a very, gothic-y, dark, and emotional album that just has always resonated with me, really deep and personally. I mean, I absolutely love it. And I'm not really aware of any other bands in this style coming from Australia, of course. Yeah, it's, mostly, talk about Australia, it's always black metal or death metal or some, mix of the two, but yeah. I believe the main member, Shira Lee, I think she went to some other projects after this that were comparable. I have not checked those out, but yeah. I bought this from Modern Invasion Music back in the day shortly after it came out, and I absolutely loved it. Picture of some of the members with lyrics, and there's a picture of Shira Lee herself. I remember back in the day, it was when I was really into gothic, and I was just like, oh, I'm in love, and I even, as stupid and embarrassing as it is, probably sent her some dumb email. Well, I should say I probably did. I know I did. I sent her some dumb email saying oh my God, you're so gorgeous, and I love you so much, so let's get married. Yeah. But yeah, Chalice, really great project. For years now, I've been meaning to get their other albums. I've heard them, there are streaming services and whatnot all these years later, but just never got around to actually picking up the physical versions of them, which is definitely an error on my part. But if you've not heard Chalice and you'd like that sort of gothic doom metal variant with just cleanly sung female vocals here, then you'll absolutely love this album. Chronicles of Dysphoria. Alright, partially disregard what I said in my last video about Australia not having a lot of bands like this, because the next band, which I just realized now, is also from Australia. So continuing on, we're going to talk about Evregus and the Secret Kingdom. Another album, many years ago I bought this. Evregus was the work of Judy and Simon, and in 1998 they put out an EP called The Final Wish, and then this album, The Secret Kingdom, in 2001. Then afterwards, the band was inactive for several years. It wasn't until 2010 they put out an EP, and another 7 years passed, and they put out a single, so it's pretty safe to say the band probably won't be putting out any new music anytime soon. That's at least the impression I'm getting. But anyway, going back to this 2001 album, basically what we have here is gothic doom metal, kind of put through a filter very similar to something like gothic doom metal meets Dead Can Dance or Dargard, something like that. And basically neoclassical darkwave doom death gothic metal, and it's been phenomenal. It is really good. There's a very medievalish kind of vibe to this album with soaring female vocals and sort of well done male vocals. I'm trying to think of the word, baritone, I guess, was sort of is how he delivers them. No growled vocals in this one, but just really gloomy, very dark, and melancholy and just medieval sounding. And the synthesizers often have that sort of neoclassical medieval touch that again bands like Dargard used, and then sort of world music that Dead Can Dance was certainly famous for, and obviously Dead Can Dance was from Australia, so it's not too hard to pick up on what this band's inspiration was. They wanted to do a metal variant of Dead Can Dance, and all these years later, I think there's been a fair share of bands that have tried to blend that sound of Dead Can Dance with their music, but I think this band did it the best because it was a good merger of the two styles, maybe leaning a little bit more towards the dark wave and neoclassical tendencies, but nevertheless a very, very good album, one that I used to listen to quite a bit back in the day. I think the best part about this video is it's going to give me an opportunity to kind of dive into some albums I have not listened to in a very long time. So there's the front cover, picture of Simon, lyrics, picture of Julie. So as you can tell kind of from the imagery and such, they definitely wanted to go for that medieval vibe, and I think they were very successful with this album. It's a bit of a shame that it took them another 9 years to put out more material, and then by the time they got to that new EP, Judy had left the scene completely from as far as I can tell, and just, a new singer named Robin joined the band. I haven't heard that material, but again, doing this video will probably motivate me to actually check out some of these other newer stuff from these bands. So, yeah, Rodriguez, the Saber Team. Continuing on, we're going to go to France and talk about the band Angel Lore and their 2012 album Errance. I got to know Angel Lore and one of their members, Francois, probably back around like 2007, 2008 time frame. He was doing a project back then known as Betrayed, which was sort of like a ambient folk project, and I did several album covers for him. All this stuff was released digitally, and I haven't heard it in years. I don't even know if he even has it online anyway, if you would like to hear it. But right around that same time, he started Angel Lore with some friends, and they became, I think, pretty well-known band in like the gothic, or the modern gothic, doom metal genre. Angel Lore is, of course, named after the old Tristania song from their first album, Widow's Weeds, and the cool thing about this album is it kind of takes you back to that 90s song, which I think, at the time, it sort of disappeared from this scene at the time. This also reminds me of stuff like Static Fear, which I mentioned earlier, Imperium, and maybe a bit like My Dying Bride too, and then, you know, another more modern artist like Draconian is definitely influenced here. This is very, very sad, very melancholy death doom, and it's just really, really good. Growled vocals, cleanly sung parts, some female vocals, violin, just very mournful, just something you want to listen to when you're just really down in the dumps and just not feeling too good about life. So yeah, definitely a very, very sad, very miserable sounding record, but I absolutely love it, and I've loved it for many years. I have a sort of a special connection to this album as well, because a photo of mine that I took back in like 2007, 2008 ended up in the booklets, which is super cool, of course. Some lyrics, picture of the band. They were just a three-piece band in those days. And there's a picture I took in a local cemetery back then, like I said, 2007, 2008. Back when I was very passionate about photography, and you know, I used to sell prints and stuff like that back then, and Francois, he saw the picture and was like, oh, gotta use it, and I was like, damn. And it was also during a time in my life I was sort of trying to make it as a graphic designer. It was something I studied in college, but just never really realized. And then doing this sort of graphic design service, doing artwork and layouts for bands, sort of segued into me doing photography and that kind of stuff for some bands a few years down the road too. But yeah. Anyway, Angel Lore, very, very good French gothic doom metal. The next album was an album I came across about 15 years ago, found it in a secondhand shop, and I've absolutely loved it since then. It's sort of become a staple that I have to listen to this album at least once a year, like on rainy, gloomy days such as this. So the band in question is DeLorean and their album When All the Laughter Has Died. It's a Finnish band that put out 3 albums in the late 90s and early 2000s, and just kind of disappeared. They also were involved in various dark ambient and ritualistic projects, which I guess has kind of been their focus for the past 15 years or so. But this is really just, I mean, death doom, really perfected, but really unique. There's just this very sort of, I don't know how to put it, sort of cold, liquidy sort of just despair and gloom to this album, with these sort of high-pitched, shrieking black metal vocals and just really heavy guitars. I mean, it's Finnish, so you gotta, you know, sort of know what to expect, but phenomenal album that's really well-deserved, never reissued, because this old one has been out of print for many, many years. As you can see, I found it for a cool $9 back then, and it's worth a lot more nowadays. But there's the album cover there, and yeah, just a fantastic album. Really, just mysterious sound, I guess would be another way to describe it. It's just really different and just unique. I've never heard anything that sounds exactly like this album, but just phenomenal stuff. Definitely one that you got to be in a certain headspace to listen to. But when you're in that headspace, it really resonates with you deeply, and just tremendous album. For some reason, I don't know why, it's an example of where I really got into an artist or a particular album, just didn't go down the rabbit hole and get the rest of their albums. And fortunately, their other albums are pretty hard to get to and out of print, so we'll see what happens there. But if you have not heard When All Laughter Has Died, definitely check it out. Masterpiece. In the early 90s, a band known as Theatre of Tragedy was formed in Stavanger, Norway, and they helped pioneer the gothic doom metal sound, or what later became known as the Beauty and the Beast sound, which was basically a mix of heavenly soprano female vocals and low guttural male death growls, then put through a death, doom, gothic metal filter. Theatre of Tragedy as it was, I could never really get into, and I don't know why. I had some of their albums back in the day, but it just never really resonated with me in a really deep way. So then, actually the first band I discovered in that style is a band known as Tristania, and their album's Widow's Weed, which was released in 1999 originally. Or 1998, I'm sorry. This was an album I discovered via Napster back in the very early days of Napster, and I bought this straight away, absolutely loved it. But this to me is absolutely the best album ever released in the Beauty and Beast or doom gothic metal style. Throughout this whole album, there's just a very mournful, very depressive, just miserable feeling, very gloomy, very dark, and an album I've listened to for many, many years now and just absolutely love. The mishmash of Vibeke Stene's soprano vocals and choirs intermingled with Morten Wieland's low death growls. It's just when I first heard it, I didn't really know something like that could even exist. It was really shocking to me. This was back in the days when I was still really discovering underground metal. And then when I heard the neoclassical instruments, I was like, what is this, man? I didn't think something like this could exist. And it was even, this was 2000 when I got into this album. Maybe 99, I can't really remember, but I just couldn't believe something like this could exist. It was so fascinating to me, and I absolutely just love this album. There is not a misstep or a bad moment on this entire record, but my favorites are Evenfall, December Elegy, Angel Lore, My Lost Lenore, Wastelands Curse. The whole album is just phenomenal. It's just so good, and yeah, out of all the bands that did the Beauty and the Beast style, this was definitely the most depressive and just the most meticulous and just well done out of them. So yeah, just so much, just nothing but great memories of this album every time I play it. I remember I used to walk around a lot back in those days in the trench coat and with headphones and stuff like that, always playing this album. I absolutely loved it. Just put myself in a perpetual gloomy mood, because that's what this music was all about. But just great stuff, man. I love this album. The band, however, would change their style a little bit by the time they got to their second album, Beyond the Veil. They started adding more choirs, and it seemed a little more, still doomy, but a little more lighthearted. Then eventually, when Morten Wieland left the band in 2001, they started adding some electronic influences and more straight gothic metal feel, which I never really got into too deeply. But Widow's Weeds and Beyond the Veil are phenomenal albums, well worth looking up. Morten Wieland himself also went on to a band called Serenia, which is just straight gothic metal. I had the first album back when it first came out, and didn't do shit for me. I was hoping that he would, continue on the Tristania style of old that he did, but it was just straightforward gothic metal. It never really did much for me. But yeah, man, if you've ever heard this is the cream of the crop as far as gothic doom metal or Beauty and the Beast metal is concerned. Masterpiece. Couple more, and I'm going to end this Death, Doom, and Other Gloom video. But before then, let's talk about Shape of Despair and their album Shades of. What can I say about this album? Gloom. Total fucking gloomy funeral doom is what we have here. Very atmospheric and very slow, with both male spoken vocals and low guttural vocals. some occasional backing female vocals, very ethereal, sort of symphonic keyboards, and occasional flute, which is very ethereal, very atmospheric. Feel this album. The first time I heard this album, I had actually, I think, downloaded it and then burned it to a CDR, but I was coming either from work or to work, and it was a snowstorm, so I always have this sort of remembrance of listening to them for the first time, just seeing all the snow falling from the sky and driving through it really slowly. It's kind of funny when you connect music to certain memories, be they important or just, kind of trivial like that, but it's always what I remember every time I hear this album. But very, very good album. Totally just one of the most atmospheric funeral doom albums, and with a bit more of a melodic touch to it as well, and it's just this strange sort of lingering, this kind of mysterious feel to it as well. Just seems to be a thing with Finnish bands. This has a feel very, very on par with the DeLorean album, and just an immense album. The band's put out several other albums since this one. They're all really, really good, but Shades of still is like the best they ever did. And even their demo, Alone in the Mist, which came out a few years before this, was very, very good too, which I think they just re-released a couple of years ago. And this album basically features 4 songs from that demo re-recorded and then 1 new song. Very, very good album. I actually had an opportunity to see these guys live when I was in Helsinki, Finland back in 2012, but I opted out for complete uncontrolled drunkery at a nearby bar instead. So that same evening I could have also seen Baratheon live, so I fucked up majorly, as you could probably tell. But just immense, very, very good album. Shape of Despair. Shades of. Alright, one more for this Death, Doom, and Other Gloom video, and perhaps somewhere down the road we'll continue this series. Next one is an obvious one, but one that means a hell of a lot to me. It's on my t-shirt, but it's not the album you think. It is The Angel and the Dark River by My Dying Bride. As far as I can remember, The Angel and the Dark River was my entry point to My Dying Bride, and I absolutely love this album. The album itself was a transition album for the band, as they completely dropped all of the growled vocals and the more somewhat hastier moments that some of their earlier were characterized, but this is just pure, just doom and just gloom. It's, man, there isn't a misstep or a bad song on this otherwise really long album. There's some dark ambient characteristics in here, and I just love Aaron's just painful sounding vocals. Just, I said this before, but My Dying Bride was one of those albums one of those bands where I really connected with, because I thought, like, the feelings that were in their music was really genuine, like they really were these depressive characters. But then when I read an interview shortly after the Dreadflowers came out, some interviewer asked them, like, hey, is this really who you are? And they were like, no, we're actually pretty happy dudes. This is just the style of music we like to do. So I was like, damn, we're not the same after all. But I love this album. The Cry of Mankind, Black Void, Just See to Suffer, and Two Winters Only. I mean, every song is just phenomenal. There's a couple different versions of this album out there. There's some that has like bonus tracks nowadays. From a live performance in Poland from 1995, I want to say, which is also from the DVD they released around that time, or it was a VHS tape originally, but then later on re-released as a DVD in the early 2000s. All the lyrics. Yeah, man, this every time this is pure nostalgia. It just takes me back to those gloomy days of old when life felt just painful every day. Back when I thought, like, I was just gonna kill myself one day, pretty much. Pretty much. Some bad associations with this album and albums like this, but at the same time, it was sort of cathartic to listen to this kind of stuff and just take it in and take the beauty in all this kind of music and just I love early My Dying Bride. Everything they did in the 90s was phenomenal. The Dreadflowers ended up being the last album they did that I really, really love, but they have done a few okay albums in the past 20 years as well. But man, that 90s stuff from My Dying Bride is just untouchable, man. Just amazing. Well, thank you for joining me here on Joe's Metal Man Cave. I hope you discovered some new albums, and if you know these albums, I haven't listened to them in a long time, well, here's an opportunity to pull them out the next time it rains, or next time you're just in that depressive headspace. Well, here you go, and anyway, thanks for watching. My name is Joe. See you next time. Drink some whiskey if you want, and thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Later.